Okay, so this is the painting of Ezio from Black Rose Wars. It was part of the Sator box stretch goals. Absolutely love this miniature, and it was 100% the first miniature I wanted to paint. Now, up on the screen, you can see on the right hand side, I've got the reference art that I'm going to be using to paint this miniature, and I'm going to be using Citadel Contrast paints to be able to do this and to paint this miniature. So, as with all of my painting, I start light colours and then go to the darker colours afterwards. So I'm going to start with Apothecary White, and I'm just using my Series 7 Winsor & Newton size 0 brush for pretty much the vast majority of this. I will start going to a smaller brush, and it's just a matter of putting this on relatively liberally, not huge amounts of paint here. You don't want it to pool everywhere, but you do want the contrast effect to take place. Now it looks really grey when you put this Apothecary White on at first, but it will dry lighter, and also, of course, you are comparing it to the Wraith bone. So this miniature has been primed with Citadel Wraith bone spray. In my opinion, the best primer colour for Citadel contrast paints. It gives them a nice warm glow. It's not as bright as Corax White, but not as dull as Grey Seer, of course. But it's a really nice base to put the contrast paints on. So looking at the reference art here, obviously there's a lot of white to be painting on for this miniature and this character. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. There's a few little, I don't know what you call them, sashes, I guess, that are red. So I've left 2 at the front, which are identical to the reference art, and then 2 at the back, which I didn't see with the reference art, but I will be using in this case. So you can see there the 2 that we're talking about. With these miniatures, I mean, man, we're talking about a lot of miniatures. I can't remember exactly. Let me have a look. So in the stretch goal Sator box, we're looking at 73 new miniatures. So that's going to take a long time, as you'd imagine. And I'm not going to rush through them. I'm going to be doing little by little. I will put them up on YouTube, onto the channel. And I will definitely be doing a few live stream versions as well. Unfortunately, at the moment, the live stream's been a bit fickle in terms of crashing after about an hour. So that's why I decided to do this as videos, but also because I wanted to do it in several different stages. Now, in terms of painting Ezio, for the whole of the painting, it took about an hour. So not long at all, really. And again, it's the beauty of contrast paints. They are very fast and they give good results. I've been really pleased with the end result, and I will show you the end result at the end of this video, of course. So we're just still going over all of the white areas, which there is a lot of. Being sure not to get over the actual skin parts. Here, I'm just looking to see what parts are metal and what parts are different to white. And the reason why you go from light to darker is because if I place this Apothecary White on an area that I want to go over with the brown or whatever it might be, it won't really affect it that much. Whereas obviously you can't do it the other way around. So I can go in with a brown and then try and do an Apothecary White. I would have to rebase that colour. So the arms obviously are white. The gauntlets he's got are metal, so I'm going to leave them to do those as metal. But just doing this stage, because it's a big proportion of the miniature itself, it really starts to show the detail, and that's what really impressed me with these miniatures, especially the Sator box miniatures, is how detailed they are and how well they've got the depth of detail on the miniatures. It's absolutely superb, and you'll see from the final part of this painting video that yeah, it looks pretty awesome in terms of final product. So here I'm just looking to see what's going on with this, with the arms and the hands, and there's a tiny little bit of trim on his left arm, not on his right, because he's got like this kind of like ribbon or sash around his right hand, So I'm just looking to see, right, okay, how am I going to paint that? What colours we're going to use for that? I actually, in the end, decided to use a red for that sash around his sword arm. So you can see there the amazing effect that Apothecary White produces on these miniatures. Yeah, of course you could. I haven't done, but I could go in after I've done this and highlight up with some Wraith bone on the highlight parts of the cloak. But I actually really like the pure effect of Apothecary White. It is a grey, of course it's a grey. You can't have shades of white, of course. So it's got to use grey. And here I'm just going making sure I do the all of the cloak here with the white. Now his cape has got a red inlay. So his cape's kind of like white on the outside, and then it's got a red inlay. And we'll be doing that when we move on to the red. So just checking here to make sure I've hit all the white parts of the miniature, especially the detail parts, because the trim around the cloak has got some really fantastic detail. So I just wanted to make sure I had hit those with the Apothecary White. So first stage done, and to be honest, that's the vast majority of the miniature is this white area, as you can see from the art there. And then we move on to the next colour, which I think I go straight on to red. So I really wanted to see how the red shaped up alongside the white. Oh no, I didn't. Sorry. Thank you. Guilliman Flesh is next, so we want to do skin tone. Guilliman Flesh is a lighter kind of flesh tone, and I feel that was quite fitting to the art here. There are different Citadel Contrast colours for skin tone, but in this case I was using this. Also, something to note for this miniature, I didn't. I'm still using the same brush. I'm just making sure I go into all the detail of the body there, especially around the neck, and then it's the hands. Don't have to be quite as careful as this next to the blade, because that's going to be Leadbelchered up in a minute, but certainly the white trim, did not want to go over that with this skin tone. And you can already see, just with the white, the detail starting to pop out now. It's just absolutely beautiful sculpt. I can't go over that too much. And it really bodes well for the rest of the miniatures. I think they're all going to just really sing with these contrast paints. Pop on the board, and they're really nice. So just making sure I do the actual skin parts and not the kind of sash that's around his sword hand. And there we go. And already looking really nice, showing those details a little bit more with the recesses. Yeah, that sword's a little bit bent, and maybe could do with a bit of hot water and cold water to straighten it out, but that's something that can be done later. So now leveling it around, just making sure I haven't missed any skin parts. Great dynamic pose. I actually really love that pose. Rather than just standing up straight with a sword or whatever it might be, you can see he's kind of like lurking around. And in terms of Ezio and how he plays in the game, it's very thematic. So he basically can't be targeted with attacks or anything. Here we go with the Blood Angels red. So this is going to do the red areas. And you basically choose a target when you deploy the evocation. You choose an enemy mage, and then he basically follows him. And once he gets into the same hex as that target mage, he basically assassinates him. So it is a true assassin. And then Ezio disappears from the board. Really, really cool. I love that idea. Now, what I'm not sure of, because he's obviously got a room that you can summon him from. Now, I don't know. The only thing I don't know is if, let's say, another mage goes into that room and activates it, if they don't now control Ezio and then change the target. I probably would assume yes, but I need to look into that. But the red against the white is, you can see it with the reference art, it just really does pop and it really does show it. So I'm going in here, I'm going as relatively careful because I need to keep a white trim. If you look at the reference art, there's definitely a white trim on that. So that's what I was trying to make sure I kept, as you can see here. But if I didn't quite catch it, it doesn't matter. I can just go in with a white and just re-establish that white trim to these sashes. But a really nice contrast between the white, this red, and now I'm moving on to the belt, I believe. The belt sash. Again, just being, a bit careful, just trying to look to see where the metal actually lies. Again, it doesn't matter too much because the metal Leadbelcher will actually go over this red contrast. But make sure I don't go over the white. That's the important part here. Okay. So just ensuring I've got everything here. Okay, and now it's over to, I believe, the lapels of his cloak, which are red. Again, just being really careful with this. I mean, when you use contrast paints, it is a kind of one coat wonder. But that also means that if it goes anywhere you don't want it to go to, it's going to cause you a lot of grief. And there we go. And now I realise I need to kind of do the cloak, the inner part of the cloak, and I've just got a little bit on that that sash going, or that belt going across. So now I'm going into the inside of the cloak, and that's as careful as I possibly can, between his arm, so in the inner part of his arm. And it's just a case of being careful, being really careful with that. There's a little bit, once I've done that, I move on to kind of like almost like a line going down the sleeve, the cloak, because we want to try not to go over the top, but you want it to show up. You want it to show up on the miniature at the end, that you've got this red inner part of the cloak, without going over the white arm. So that was the trick with that part. Yeah, of course you can if you make a mistake, you can always go back with some Wraith bone, but ideally you want to try and avoid that, because that's just going to extend the time it takes to paint these things. Now underneath, again, it's just the inner part of the cloak I'm trying to hit with all the red here. And this, of course, is filmed all in real time. I wanted it to show the fact that this is genuinely how long it took to paint this whole miniature. Not any shortcuts or speed ups from this one. Just the very fine part of the inner part of this cloak again, and it also breaks up. If you're looking at things, it breaks up parts of it as well, which is really nice. And I've got a little bit of red over the white, but I will go back and touch that up later on. Just make sure the lapels are completely done there. And just the inside of them as well. Okay. Now on this particular miniature, the cloak is not as low as on the reference art there, which is fine. But it's yeah, I'm pretty happy with the result. The white's really working now. You see what I mean? When it dries a lighter shade than what you put it on with, and it looks so good. Okay, so we've now done the white and the red parts, and I think next we move on to the browns. So we need to do the boots and the legs, we need to do the belts and the sashes. So Cygor brown is a very, very deep dark brown, and this is what I'm going to do the legs and the boots with. So we're going in now with the legs and the boots in this Cygor brown. Try my best as well. You see that I went over the white a little bit. So if you do make a mistake, if you quickly get some water on it, not a huge amount of water on your brush, but a little bit of water on your brush, and literally just start taking away the contrast paints, and that usually works fine. It's a very, very dark brown, but which matches the kind of reference art, right? And of the time. And when it dries, you still get the contrast effect, but it gives a really, really nice deep brown. I do actually quite like Cygor brown. It is a nice brown to have. This miniature is not the easiest to kind of, because the base is so big, my holder, so I have got a miniature holder, but it's too small for this particular base. It was a very big base. So I'm just trying to really look in here and try and hit just the leg, not any cloaks, even from bits that you won't even see, to be honest, when you're actually playing the game. But for my sake, I really wanted it to be as good as I possibly could get in the time that I've allocated for it. So just making sure my brush is nice and clean and got a nice sharp point, and I can keep going. Trying not to get the brown on the actual base as well was really important for me, because ultimately I wanted to do a one shot at the miniature and then the base as well. I didn't want to have to go back over the base. So I am being careful here not to get the brown onto the base at all. And as you can see, we continue. Now this was quite hard because it's hard to get into the parts of the miniature because of the dynamic nature of the pose, I guess, mostly. But at least he's got his legs spread, as it were. It makes it easier to get the brush to the whole parts of the leg. But so, for example, here it's like, well, I'm going to try and go into the side and just caught the sash there. Trying at different angles until I can find somewhere where I can get to the leg itself. So apologies you can't see this at the moment because it's just an awkward position of the base itself and the model. And but I'm happy that I can get to most of it, and I can still use this size 0 brush to do pretty much all of it. Okay, I think that's the legs done. And you can already see that he's really starting to pop. And that's the difference between just a sea of plastic and, you know, a little bit of effort, like this 1 hour per miniature kind of thing. I mean, it's going to, you know, even if it's 1 hour per miniature, we're still talking about 72 hours, right? And some of the miniatures are massive in comparison, so we'll probably take a little bit more time. So, you know, we're talking about a lot of hours of painting, but I think it's worth it. Because Black Rose Wars is definitely going to be a keeper in terms of my game collection. It's popular in the game board group. I love the solo mode. The solo mode's really good fun. And the miniatures are gorgeous, so yeah, this is going to be a keeper, definitely. So I'm just doing the sash here with the Cygor brown. Just by looking at the art there, it looks like it's the same. I'm just making sure I'm getting all of it, using the tip of the brush. The Winsor Newton Series 7 brushes, this is the only one I've ever bought, but I've used it a lot, and it's it's just brilliant. You think it's losing its point. You think, oh God, after you've used it for a bit, you go, well, I think that's had it. And it doesn't. It just keeps bringing back that point, every time. Now I could look after my brushes better than I do. I don't use like brush soap or anything like that. I literally just clean them with water between paints. And yeah, so I reckon if you really looked after this brush, it would last for a very long time. And it's lovely because it keeps that really nice point. Okay, so that's the sash done. Just doing the belt part there. It connects it around. So it's just a matter of just checking all the different parts. Making sure I've gone over and under, so we're not got that scrappy looking paint job. Especially as it's contrasted against white. Any mistakes will really show up on this miniature. Okay, so we've got the Cygor brown used, so let's clean our brush. Obviously for cleaning contrast paints, just use water, like normal. That's absolutely fine. Just don't mix water with contrast paints. It'll stop the effect from happening. You need to use the contrast medium to thin contrast paints. Right, Wyldwood is next, which is a lighter dark brown, I would say, compared to Cygor brown particularly. Very good for wood, as it suggests, but also good for leather as well. It's a lovely colour. So, for example, the Clockwork Golem, which I've earmarked, I've primed, that one's going to be using this Wyldwood for all of the wood parts of the miniature, which is quite extensive. But yeah, if you want a slightly darker brown, I've also got Snakebite leather, which is a nice one to use for leather, as it suggests. But it's quite a light yellowy brown, I would say, and I wanted that scabbard. I wanted that scabbard a lot darker. So that's the scabbard done, and then we noticed that we got another sash that I start painting in Wyldwood. So I didn't twig to the fact that I'd done the other sashes in Cygor brown. So I painted this in totality with the Wyldwood. And then in a minute I will realise so it's about now I'm just seeing and saying, okay, I've done Cygor brown, and now I've gone to Wyldwood. So clean the brush, and then basically start taking the paint off. So the brush will take the paint off, use a little bit of water to help with that. So go back to Cygor brown, which is what I did the sashes with. And we go back over that sash. Again, it doesn't matter, it's not been dried or anything, so all it'll do is just mix with whatever's left on there. And it also gives a definition between that and the scabbard as well. So glad I realised that straight away. Okay, so that's the Cygor brown stuff done. And constantly referring to the art there to make sure I've got things correct. Okay, what are we going on to now? Going back to Apothecary White, I think this was for the collar. So I'm going down to my thinner brush. I would say this is about a 000. This was a Army Painter Kalinsky Masterclass brush. So again, it's a sable brush, but very, very thin. And I just wanted to make sure I got into that collar area, which I completely forgot about when I was doing the white, it seems. And I think that's the thing when you're painting. When you're painting, as you start to move through the model, you'll start to pick up on, that should have been, that should have been. So here with the belt sash, I noticed there was a little bit of white missing, and also you notice the top part of the sash isn't going all the way to the metal buckle. So here I'm just touching up the red parts of the sash to make sure they are fully painted. And it is just a matter of just doing it dynamically, just looking around your model and going, well, actually, that should have that, that should have that. Again, a few little spots I just missed a little bit up in the corners where it was white and it should have been red. So just making sure it's really as clean as possible. And here I think I go over the trim a little bit now. That red is very vibrant. Blood Angel's red is perfect for this. A really nice vibrant red, which is exactly what you want to contrast the white. Okay, what do we move on to next? So next, right now we're going to do the metal work. So we're going to start with the base of Leadbelcher. And then, if you've seen any of my other videos, it's the exact same. Leadbelcher, and then it's not Apothecary, Basilicanum grey over the top of it. So going back to my size 0 brush here, making sure to use a bit of water to thin down the paint, because this is not contrast paint now, this is traditional paint. So it needs to be thin thinner so you can actually apply it and it can actually flow. And we're doing the gauntlets now with the hidden blade mechanics that you can see on the actual arm itself. The blade itself, and now we're doing the central belt buckle. And just doing this metal work really brings the miniature together, I'd say. Getting that metal to put together really does help. Now actually, to be honest, like doing this metal part probably took a few minutes, but one of the longest parts of this video, you'll see a bit later on, is doing the base. The base actually takes quite a while because it's quite intricate. It's still using contrast. By the way, there I was just doing the metal work on the around the waist, the belt. Here's the other gauntlet being done. Again, just making sure I don't go over any of the light bits that I've done. I don't want to have to redo those. So any white parts, not the skin, just making sure I'm going over the necessary bits. I'm filling those in. Also notice that the sword, the hilt of the sword will need to be done, so there I am painting the hilt. Now the blade. And it's really starting to come together now. And I've said it on, I think, every single one of my painting videos using contrast paints. What I really love about them is that you're seeing immediate effects as you go along. So it's not like you base the whole miniature and it looks a bit plain, then you get some washes and you put those on, that looks better, and then you have to go in highlights and layering, and then it really pops. Yeah, of course, doing that technique, you're going to get a better result, final result than this. But in terms of time, no. Contrast is so good for speed. I would say ease as well. The fact you don't have to do all this layering and washing and basing and all the rest of it. You literally do a one coat wonder, as they call it, and then your model's finished. And it motivates you to see those end effects very quickly. You know, I'm painting all the time. I absolutely love it. It's not my job. It's literally a hobby, but I'm doing it all the time in the evenings, and it's almost addiction. I find it so therapeutic, and it's so nice to see these immediate results. You know, after an hour of painting it, well, no, after half an hour, you're seeing the results of your miniature. I mean, he's looking so good just now, and I haven't even gone over the metal. So the metal looks quite plasticky, but he's looking top. And of course, the sculpt is where it all comes from, right? The better the sculpt, the better the paint job will look. Especially with contrasts. Because they don't take your brush as where it finalises where it's going to go, the paint. It's where the recesses are in the miniature. That's what it's looking for. So if the recesses in the miniature aren't clear, or if they in wrong places, or whatever it might be, that will affect the contrast paints. There's not a huge amount you can do about it. So here I'm just checking over the miniature, just make sure I've got everything. I think there was a little bit on the belt there that I missed. And just doing the pommel of the sword there. Just make sure I've got everything before I let that metal, that Leadbelcher paint dry. Okay, I think I'm happy. Also, what I'd probably do is, I mean, as you can see, you can do, but wait for each layer to dry completely before moving on to the next one. So don't do the red until the white's completely dry. I mean, I just went straight on, and I've gone to each layer directly from the next. I don't know if I would recommend that. I'd probably say just give it a little bit of time before you do each one. Around now. Right, contrast Wyldwood. I need to do the little satchel on his belt. I realised. I completely forgot it. And I don't want that to be Cygor brown. I want that to be slightly different. And I don't want it to be too light. So I was umming and ahhing whether to use Black Templar or Wyldwood, and I decided to go with the Wyldwood. I wanted it more brown, like a leather. So just making sure I've got all of the part of the satchel, including the inner part of that bag, but not going over the white as per normal. Do not want to go over the white on any parts of this. If I do, I can touch it up with some just plain white paint, but I want to try and avoid that if I can. Okay, this is the Cygor brown, I think, or was this Wyldwood again? And just make sure I got everything. Can't remember. I think I was just touching up. Okay. So I'm loving how he looks at this point. Really happy with the progress. The white and the red really popping against each other. And now with the metal work in, we've lost all the white parts that should be white. I noticed that I still need to just touch up a little bit of the red, and especially the kind of the rope or the sash that it's around the handle of the sword. It's got it around his fingers and his fist. So now I'm gone to my thin brush again, because again I don't want to go over the skin work that I've done so far, and just going in, taking my time to do all of that rope. Making sure I'm using enough paint that it goes to the recesses and it gives me that effect, but not too much that it's going to literally pull over the edges and give a messy effect, a messy result. It's nice to have a big base to hold on to be honest. So that's good. Constantly looking at that reference art just to make sure I've got it fully done. And being an Assassin's Creed fan, this miniature, I was so pleased when I saw it. And when I saw how they done the sculpt and everything, I was like, yes, great job, Ludus Magnus. This is just what I would want. I'm not, you know, I can't believe all this stuff's just like added stretch goal stuff. It is crazy. Yeah, we've had to wait for it a long time. Yeah, we've had to pay. We didn't have to, but a lot of us paid the call to arms for the extra payment, and that, you know, rightly so. That was quite controversial. It riled people up. You don't want to have to pay for something and then have to pay more because of delays or whatever it might be. But when you see the amount of content that you get in this game, I'm absolutely fine with paying that extra. That I've got no regrets, no kind of animosity because of that. I'm more than happy to have paid for that to get this game in our hands. And there I was just smartening up the trim, and I realised I'd just gone over the red part of that sash. So again, water and run the brush over it, and I'll get rid of that paint. This is just normal Wraith bone, by the way, base, and just making sure I'm hitting all of those. Kind of a bit like edge highlighting, I would say, is probably the best way to describe it. To hit all of those the white trim around the red. And using my 000 brush here just to make sure I've got maximum control with such a small amount of area trying to do this. And to be honest, I was quite happy with how I did the red. Yeah, there's a few little tiny bits like this one here I just needed doing. Just requires a little bit more of a stable brush hand, but again, I've gone over the red again. So while it's wet, that's the key. You'll be able to pick that paint back up again, like I've just done there. Another look. Looking nice and smart. Then we go back on, and I realised that where I'd done the inner part of the cloak, I had gone over just slightly the edges of some parts of those, especially that top shoulder there. And it really don't matter. It really doesn't matter. I'm not going to go back over with Apothecary White because it's almost like an edge highlight anyway. So it serves purposes twice. It kind of gives you a little bit of an edge highlight, and it's getting rid of the red. So I'm just checking here, and I'm just making sure I'm happy with everything I've done. Okay, so we'll move to the second recording. So I've done all of the smartening up the white areas, and you can really see that the miniature's really come along now. There's a few things to do. I'm going with Basilicanum grey now for the metalwork. So all of that Leadbelcher that I put on, I'm going to go over with a coat of Basilicanum grey. So back to the size 0 brush, and then it's just a case of painting over the metal. Making sure I don't go over any white, of course. That will ruin the miniature, but this gives a really realistic metal colour, silver metal colour. I really love this. And yeah, I know his gauntlets aren't dark metal, dark silver metal, but in the case of this miniature, I'm going to do them with that dark silver metal. So just doing a little bit of the buckles, linked to the cloak. I did the shoulder here as metal. I thought it'd be quite nice as a little bit of a break point between the white. I'm still quite happy with it, even though I think the reference art quite clearly shows it as white. It's white, like white armour. But no, I was happy with the fact that I just went with a silver kind of shoulder plate. The problem with the Basilicanum, or my Basilicanum Grey, is the pot lid won't stay open, which is a common error or a common problem with Citadel paint pots. They just will not stay open, which is more of a bind when you're dealing with contrast paints, because you kind of want to keep immediately just picking up the paint from the paint lid as you go back to the miniature every time. So we're just doing all the metalwork here, including the gauntlets, the blades, going on to the other gauntlets here, the buckles. Pick up some more paint. Don't pile this on, or else you'll lose a lot of the metallic sheen. You want to kind of go on a little bit careful with this one, onto the silver, just to give it into the recesses, to give it contrast, of course, which is the whole point, the key point. And here we go through the rest of the gauntlet. You've got an awesome detail in the gauntlet with the mechanical hidden blade part. So I really wanted that to have definition. So again, this will really help for that. Now the blade. And again, just going over the whole blade. Best to work towards the hilt or the tip, so you've got a bit of an even coat. Now it looks really dark to start with, but just like the Apothecary White, once it dries off, once it dries, it will actually look silver. It'll have that silver shine that we would want from that. And I'm just taking away it from the sleeve there. There's a little bit of white detail on his left hand sleeve that I wanted to keep white, which you can see from the reference art as well. And then go into the smaller brush just to do the pommel of the sword, just to make sure I'm not going over the skin work that I've done or the red sash. Okay, so 42 minutes in, and we've pretty much finished the miniature. So I was looking at this and thinking, right, what else needs to be done? I was quite happy with the metalwork now. The metalwork looks good. The white I love. Always love the white. I think it looks great. And the red in contrast really brings out that two-tone like the reference art. So here you can see the model in all its glory. An absolute fantastic pose. I do love that pose. And we move on to the Wraith bone. I realised that part of his cloak, just the trim detail, had some red in it where it should have been white. So here I'm just literally touching up this one part, and it's just at the back there. And it might even be hard to see on the video when I do this, but it's the bit under the trim that just needed a little bit of work. Much better. And also, just below his hand, I got some brown somehow on that part, so I'm just heading over that and just putting a little bit of thin down Wraith bone on top of that. Now with those two little blemishes restored, I'm looking around, seeing if there's anything else to do, and you can see, really chuffed with this miniature, how it's come out. That was just over 40 minutes of painting live, so that's in real time, and that's the miniature kind of done. Now, when I look at this, I go away for a minute because I'm thinking I want a beard effect. If we look at the reference art, he's kind of got like stubble. I wanted to replicate that. I wanted a kind of stubble look. So I went over to my washes, my Citadel washes, and I was gonna go in with a Agrax Earthshade to give it a brown tinge, and I thought, no, it needs to be a black tinge. So it needs to be Nuln Oil. So I grabbed my Nuln Oil and my size 0 brush. Okay, so going in with the Nuln Oil now, to put a kind of like stubble effect. And the Nuln Oil is a wash, so it's not super thick. You wouldn't go in with Black Templar, for example, because that would be ridiculous. You could potentially put a fair amount of medium in with the Black Templar. I'm sure it would give the same effect, but Nuln Oil's a lot easier to use. And just keep going over the mouth part, making sure you leave the kind of lips as best you can, and just keep going over the sides, where the chin would be and everything else, to give it a kind of 5 o'clock shadow, I suppose. Now, hopefully this comes up onto the camera, but you can see there that it's made a bit of definition between his face, and now I'm really pleased with this. It looks so cool. And that is Ezio completed. So 46 minutes and we've finished Ezio. Now the rest of this video is doing the base, which, you know, it takes a little bit of time. I love these bases, by the way. Since the first core game, these bases are superb. They're great. So we're going in with Basilicanum Grey to do all the stonework. And to be honest, it's just a case of going in and making sure you don't hit, as best you can, don't hit the vines, because that will really dull down the vine look, and those vines won't pop if you go over those. So hitting the common stones, using a fair amount of paint to try and get in those recesses is quite important. And sometimes just putting the brush under there. But once you've done this, it really does look nice. I love the grey cobblestones against that kind of green vines and the roses as well. Make sure you paint all the way up to the recess between the base. I'm going to be painting around the lip of the base in black, just a standard black acrylic. So I'm ensuring I've hitting that recess before it. I don't want that to be white. And unfortunately this lid is not staying open, which would make life easier rather than keep opening it to go and get some more paint. To be honest, I've kind of got used to it now. And this certainly is the bit that takes, you know, a decent amount of time. But you want it to be right. You don't want your miniature to look really nice and then a kind of messy base that it's sitting on, standing on. Sorry. You kind of want the base to be good, to be part of the miniature, and to be as equal of standard. Just shaking up again, just to get some more paint into the lid. Obviously, if your lid's staying open, you're going to keep more paint into it than what's happening with mine. Because of course, a lot of that paint will just drip back down into the pot. Don't worry about going over the edge of that lip, because once you go on the black, it will just go straight over this grey. I'm just picking out the detail here and making sure I'm hitting all the stone parts. As I say, without going over any of the vines as best as I can. It's not the end of the world if you go over some of the vines. It will just give it a duller green look. It just won't work quite as well. Some bits are quite hard to reach underneath the miniature itself, but take your time and kind of use the side of the brush to chuck into those parts. But as you can see, the grey is fantastic. You can see it straight away now. It really does look like it's so easy for stone. So when we come to do the stone elemental evocation, That's going to be a bit of Basilicanum and grey, literally across the whole model, mostly. Can try and do some green work. We're getting and again, just making sure we're getting all of the parts. We don't want any white showing on this once we finish. Because this Wraith bone will really stand out in your miniature in comparison. And like I say, some bits are really quite hard to get in between the kind of vines, but if you get a bit of grey onto those vines, it's not going to be the end of the world, especially if it's towards the bottom of it. That's not going to matter too much. And we're getting close to finishing the stonework now. And the key with this one was just making sure that it was going in all the recesses. Because again, I didn't want white showing up on the recesses. That would look a bit rubbish. So just make sure I use enough paint to show it. Sorry that it's come a little bit out of shot there. It's just because I was trying to really look, see where these parts were. And then it's a little tiny bit more. I think it's a little bit more underneath. And what you want is the whites to just show off the vines and the flowers and the roses, obviously, and that's it. That's what you want the white to show. So it is quite important to spend a little bit of time on this stage, just to make sure you've hit everything right. Because what you'll inevitably end up doing if you start to go over some of the vines, certainly some of the rose petals, you're going to have to go in with the white and retouch up that area. And then if you make a mistake with the white, you're going to have to go back over with the Basilicanum grey. And as I've mentioned before on some of my older videos, my other videos, if you go over a dried area with the contrast paint, it will kind of take away the effect. So you want to try and avoid that. I just noticed, just need to do a bit on the edge there. And it's done. So that's the Basilicanum grey and the paving parts. And you can already see, just from that distance, that it gives a really nice effect. So just checking here. Perhaps should have moved my camera a little bit lower, just so we were properly seeing it. What a fantastic miniature it's turning out to be. Okay, so with the stonework done on the base, the next thing we move on to is the vines. So warp lightning green is what's used for these. It's a bright, vibrant green, but I think you want that vibrancy for the miniature. And you want some consistency. So I've been doing this colour for the vast majority of the paints. Now, I started painting Black Rose Wars, especially the core set, a while back when I first got it. And I wasn't using contrast paints. So some of the core box miniatures are traditional paints. And you can see the dullness in comparison. I love the effect that contrasts give, this kind of pop that contrast paints give. You could argue it's not very realistic. Because it's not. I was going to say because it's cartoony in nature, in its tone, but I don't feel it's cartoony. I just feel it. I feel it looks very crisp, and that's really good. That's exactly what I was after. So this bit takes a bit of time because you've got to be a little bit careful. You've got to make sure you're hitting all of the bits. So again, you don't want any white showing, but you ultimately don't really want to get any of the green onto the stonework because that will just look messy. Very hard to do. You just got to take your time. Use the point of your brush to really get into those gaps and into the work. Make sure you're using enough paint to make sure the paint goes to recesses. But it is quite fiddly. So this bit is the fiddly part. And as you can see now, the only white bits that we're seeing now are the roses themselves. And yeah, there's little thin bits of vine around that you're trying to hit. Trying to go round the roses themselves. And especially when you've got a model impeding you, it's sometimes quite hard to get to those points. Okay, we are still picking out those flowers and just carrying on with the vines. And as with anything when you're doing contrasts, it's not, I wouldn't call it a magic weapon to just make painting easy. You still need to have good brush control, which only comes with practice and experience. Especially if you want it to be time saving. If you want it time saving, it's one coat. That's quite essential for you to have contrast paints as a kind of speed painting variant. So practice will make perfect. As with absolutely anything, yes, it is easier. You don't have to do all the base and as I said, the base, the washes and the highlights and layering. You don't have to do all of those. You can certainly use washes as well as contrast paints. You can do layering or highlighting with contrast paints. It all works exactly the same way. It just gives you a really nice base coat. So rather than a flat base coat, it gives you this kind of contrasted base coat. But you don't have to, like I'm doing here. Literally straight at the moment, till now it's just been straight out of the bottle contrast. Yes, we've used Leadbelcher to kind of do the metal work as per normal. But apart from that, it's been pure contrast from the pot. And I think that's it's quite key to do sometimes. To really make it a quick process. So we're getting nearly halfway through the vines. As I say, this is probably the time-consuming part. But it's very much worth it once you've done the vines. I mean, you just look at them on the video; they just really stand out. The contrast works so well. Going into all those recesses, those intertwining vines, really hitting the detail out with those. And now we've got some bits underneath the miniature which are quite hard to get to. But again, if you take your time, you should be fine with that. And sometimes the vines are very detailed, and you've got to get kind of like underneath, not underneath, but really close to the stonework. Just take your time. If you get a tiny bit of it onto the stonework, it's not going to make much difference. I mean, I have a couple of times on this. Just straight onto the stonework, just slightly. You're not going to notice it. It's certainly not worth repainting that whole stone part just to go back over again. But here you can see we continue on with those vines. Really enjoying this for one, but number two, it's really coming out nice as well. Okay. And some of them are a little bit tricky. Some of them are a little bit tricky to get. But nearly there. And look how nice it looks. It looks just so great. Now, for me, it doesn't overpower the miniature. I think that would be what a lot of people would be worried about, is that it might overpower the miniature. I don't feel that. I think it's fine. It is bright. It is relatively bright. But if anything, it makes Ezio stand out even more. So just going around the flowers, yet again the roses. Getting some more paint into the lid. This lid is actually staying open, which is nice. That makes it so much easier to paint. It means you can keep one hand on the miniature itself, especially if you're not using a holder. Okay, so just doing the last few vines here. As I say, this is probably the most time-consuming part of the miniature in total, but an important one, an important stage as well. And just looking where the flowers are, making sure I've got every bit other than the flowers. It's a tiny little flower that's hanging on the side there. Looking for the classic ones is just looking at white spots. Is the white spot flower? If it's not, it needs to be green. I think that is the vine. The vine's done. And again, it's just you know, you can be as neat as you want. The neater you are, the better the results will be, of course. So I would say that was probably the most time-consuming stage of the whole miniature paint, the whole paint job. But it is looking good, and it will really make Ezio stand out. But that does mean that I'm going to be doing the same kind of timing on all of the miniatures with their bases. So it's great to have pre-painted miniatures, modelled bases on these miniatures, but that means it's a bit more time. I realised that I just missed out one plant here, one flower, sorry, one rose, and that was it. So just going back over that one. Done. And then finally, for the roses, I do 3 tones of roses. I do black with Black Templar. I do white, Apothecary White, for a white rose. And here, I'm mixing the red with the Apothecary White, adding medium. And I'm going in now with a pink. So I want some quite classic pink roses as well. So just changing, dotting them around, so not everyone is all clumped together. I'm just going in with that pink. And then moving on to, I think we'll probably go to, let's have a look. So moving on to the black roses next, like the black rose itself, and then hitting some of those. Literally just putting this on and put the black on. The black's a great contrast paint, and it really will have a bit of a different, distinct look. Some of those black roses. Unfortunately, the lid of the black also does not stay open, which is a bit annoying. There we go. So, as pretty much all of my paint jobs, they're not going to win competitions. But if you want something that looks good on the game board and is relatively quick to get done, this is the whole point. This is what I'm doing all these painting series for. is to give people some ideas, some thinking about contrasts in particular. Oh, by the way, white for the last roses. We don't want them to be pure white. We want them to have contrast. So Apothecary White is a fantastic one for white roses. And they will definitely stand out amongst the Basilicanum and grey of the cobble. So just doing the remaining roses now with this white. I think I've just got to get one more. Yep, it's just down underneath. Excellent. So that's the roses done. But obviously we don't want a white base. We want to finish this off by using some black acrylic black. So I'm just going off to grab some of that acrylic paint, and this is just a standard, a cheap black acrylic that I use for this one. So hopefully we come back with that in a second. But oh, here it is. Crafters acrylic. You know, I've had that for a long time, and it's done all of my bases, so it's done me well. And then a bit of water, a tiny bit of water, and then just going in to that side with the black. Just trying to be a little bit careful near the vines or flowers, not to go too much over them, because some of it does spread onto this outer part of the base as well, which is fine. It looks cool, but just got to be a little bit careful. Then I realise as I'm holding it that, do I need to hold it? Do I actually need to hold this miniature while I'm doing the base? Or can I do it a different way? A bit quicker. I mean, I'm not going to get paint all over my hands, and fingers crossed not everything. So just placing it on down to the table, making sure your hand is clean, because you're going to be manipulating the miniature using your using the hand on the actual miniature itself. So it's got plenty of friction to just literally hold the miniature, which is nice. And just using that black paint to go around the base, to kind of circle the actual painted miniature itself, give it that contrast, and finish it up to make it look a little bit more smarter. So just coming up towards the end now. Make sure I don't go onto that rose itself. Lovely. Then make sure to do the sides. And finally, just finishing off the last part of the side of the base. And that is Ezio complete. So, I'm going to be showing some pictures of the final Ezio, so you can see how he turned out. But that was Ezio being painted with contrast paints. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you get some hints, some ideas about how you might want to paint your figures, especially using contrast paints.